I'll take you around the White House real quick. We'll go to the basement of the White House, ground floor of the White House. White House Situation Room, White House Mess, some bathrooms, a couple of small offices on the side over here. That's it. Main floor of the West Wing. You've got press briefing room, Oval Office, President's private study, President's private dining room. In our White House, you had Steve Bannon when we first got there, a couple of offices right there, and the White House Chief of Staff, Vice President, National Security Advisor, Press Secretary, and a couple of comms offices. That's it. Top floor of the West Wing, you've got offices on each corner of it. You had the Senior Advisor for Policy and head of the Domestic Policy Council. You had Deputy Chief of Staff, head of Legislative Affairs. You had Senior Advisor, Deputy National Security Advisor, Ivanka, and the head of the National Economic Council. That's it on the top floor of the White House. And all of that, we're talking 20 principals. Everybody else is next door in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. Every TV in the West Wing has 4 panels on it. It'll have Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox Business. So you can see in one look what's everybody focused on traditional media-wise. At a moment's notice, you can see that all day.
They don't have the Shawn Ryan Show streaming in there?
They haven't got it streaming yet, but he looks up on the screen and you can immediately see that every single panel is protests in the Middle East. There are people hanging him in effigy. There are people burning the American flag. There are people chanting, Trump, Trump, you will see, Palestine will be free. He is watching this unfold, and it's the most visceral hatred toward a person that you can imagine. I'm watching a giant Trump head get lit on fire over there. I'm watching them stabbing Trump figure. But I had this kind of embarrassed feeling of like, man, look what they're saying about the person standing right next to me. It's just such visceral hatred. And I will never forget Trump's reaction to seeing that, though. He watches it for a minute, and then he looks at me and he goes, all right, what do we got next? The one that really stuck with me was the Elon Musk interactions, though. We had a meeting in the cabinet room. The president was working on what to do on infrastructure. We had a lot of his friends there who were big builders, who had done, giant projects, built skyscrapers, all these things. Like, what are we going to do about American infrastructure? And one of the people was Elon Musk. So we're going around the room, and people are talking about the things you would expect with infrastructure: ports, bridges, roads, airports. Elon wants to talk about a tunnel. And Elon says, I think I can get people from New York City to Washington, D.C. in 29 minutes. And we can do it via a tunnel, Hyperloop system. And Trump kind of leans back in his chair and he goes, Elon, you're talking about bridges. He's talking about roads. And this guy comes, he says, I've got a tunnel. I'm going to bring a tunnel. And Trump goes, you know what, Elon? That sounds great. Why don't you just do it? But the thing that stuck with me about that with Elon Musk is the things that you are able to do in life are often directly proportionate to the amount of criticism and ridicule that you're willing to take for doing them.
I wanted to ask you about the football. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so nuclear football, for people that don't know, if you ever see a picture of the president, chances are a few meters behind the president will be walking a military aide holding a leather briefcase. Yeah, I was standing in the West Wing one day with the president's military aide, and I jokingly said, let me hold that thing for a minute. And and to my surprise, he let me.
Are you serious?
So for about 5 seconds, I held the nuclear football at my side. There isn't a giant red button in there that you just crack it open and like, boom, and we go to nuclear war. The purpose is to verify the president's identity. So everywhere the president goes, he carries with him a little laminated card called the biscuit. On the biscuit, there are codes that are his verification codes for his identity. So in the event where there was an emergency where the nuclear football gets cracked open, the first thing that happens is communications are opened up to the National Military Command Center, and the president verifies his identity with the codes that are on the biscuit. I have heard it described in media as a Waffle House menu of pre-planned nuclear strike options. One day when I was at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, we got to go inside one of these so-called Doomsday bunkers. And the government has places around the country. What happens inside of them still remains highly classified. Some of the locations themselves remain classified. But it's basically if there was a crisis scenario in which the government had to be reconstituted outside of Washington, D.C., these are the places that you would go. And so I was taken to one of those places that was hundreds and hundreds of feet underground. When we got there, a giant metal blast door opened in the side of a mountain, and we kind of go inside, and we're down into these tunnels that take us into basically an underground city that had everything from like a made-to-order grill where you could order hot dogs and hamburgers and pizza and stuff in there, to living quarters and office space and computer space. Like I saw where my computer would be in that scenario like that. There are a couple of these that are not classified that I would encourage people to look at. It's really fascinating stuff. You can look up Raven Rock. You could look up Mount Weather. The most important event in human history is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Tiberius was the emperor of Rome when that happened. Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea when that happened. But they were not the central characters of the story. Jesus was. So why on earth would we make politicians the central characters in our story today? When politics has consumed everything. Talk about it nonstop. Every aspect of life is politics, politics, politics. And the Bible's sitting there saying, politicians aren't the central characters, Jesus is. It's sitting there waiting for you. That's where our hope is. So for me, it is a dark time. Feels like the end times. We better be living like it is because the Bible says no man knows the day or the hour that he's coming, but he's coming. So we should live like he's coming back today. But we have a hope in knowing that our God is still in control.